that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, I know that that's not talking about the work of the local church, but being a part of a church family helps to facilitate that. That when we come together as a group of believers, that there's not that distance between us. When it comes to me learning how to conform not to the world, but to be transformed by the renewing of my mind, that is best done by the people who are closest to me. Right? You can watch a YouTube video, you can watch a televangelist, you can read a book. There are a lot of really impersonal ways to I'm going to grow as a Christian, so I'm going to listen to podcasts. Right? And I get that. And podcasts are really, really useful. But nobody's going to sharpen your sword like iron sharpens iron the way that the people right here in this room will. And so I think that there is, even though this isn't talking in verses 1 and 2 about this is the work of the local church, this happens in a really effective manner when it is with the people who are closest to you. The people who share a life with you. The people who share a community with you. The people who are living through the same bad weather or good weather. The people who are living through the same bad economy or good economy. The people who are living through the same crime wave as you. Right? The people who are in the same community as you, who are experiencing life in a really similar way to you, your local church family, I think, is going to do more than anything else in the world, functionally at least, to bring about this kind of living, spiritual, transformed, sacrificial, worshipful life that you're supposed to be experiencing here on earth in the image of Jesus Christ. In verse 3, for through the grace given to me, I say to every man among you not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think. And that, I think, is echoing what Paul said back in 1 Corinthians 12 about the body, that every part of the body is placed. In fact, he even uses the word placed there, which I think is very intentional. When you place things, you put them on purpose where you want them. You don't place things by accident. You place them purposefully. I have placed the pieces on the chessboard the way that they're supposed to be arranged. I have placed the books on the bookshelf the way that I want them to be arranged. I have placed, etc., etc. And so God has placed the various members of the body where they're most effective. But if one part of the body becomes arrogant and says, well, I'm better than that part of the body because I'm part of the head, that makes me better than the foot. Or if one part of the body becomes envious of another part of the body, well, I'm just a foot, just a stinky old foot in a boot. I'm no good to anybody. Then that body stops functioning properly. And so I think verse 3 from Romans 12 is a reference to that, a callback to that analogy or that metaphor of the church being the body. So don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. Hey, and I need that also, because because of your maturity or your life experience, if God has allotted to you a greater measure of faith than me, and I don't know exactly how that works, all right? I don't want it to sound like something kind of like, esoteric or something like that. But it does say that faith has been allotted to each of us in some sense. And I think that can be because of life experience, because of age, because of wisdom, because of what phase of life that you're in. I have no problem. There's no ego here when I fully acknowledge that some of you have more faith than me. I acknowledge that. Because you're older, you're wiser, you have more life experience, maybe you're more knowledgeable in the scriptures. There are some who have more faith than me. And so I need you. I need you. Because if God has allotted to each of us a measure of faith, and if maybe I'm still at that mustard seed phase, if I'm still in that learning, growing, maturing kind of phase of life, then I need you who are more mature, more solid, to give me that good example. And I'll say it again. Best place you're going to find that is not on the internet or on a podcast. The best place you're going to find that is in the context of a local church family. And so he goes on in verse 4 and says, "For just as we have many members in one body," that's the church, "and all the members do not have the same function," 1 Corinthians 12, "so we who are many are one body in Christ and individually members one of another." We are individually members one of another. So I have a connection to Christ because of my salvation. I am in the body of Christ. I am in the church because I'm saved in Jesus Christ. But I also have a horizontal relationship to you. And I think we don't think about that always, that our Christianity has multiple dimensions. My Christianity is vertical because of my relationship, not literally vertical. You understand that God is not actually up in a cloud, like physically in a cloud up in heaven. I think we're all agreed on that, right? But I have a vertical relationship to God through Jesus Christ, and that's one element, one facet of my Christianity. But Romans 12:5 also says I have a horizontal element of my faith as well. My Christianity is not just played out in a vertical sense, in worship and sacrificial living, but it's also played out in a horizontal sense, in my service to other people, to where I humbly regard other people as more important than myself. And my discipleship is not just a discipleship for God, but it's also a foot-washing kind of discipleship with other people. Vertical and horizontal. Two facets to my Christianity. But we do have to understand that our connection within a church and our responsibility to the work does only go so far. Local churches are only authorized to do their own work. Elders, for example, are to oversee their own flocks. 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, says that these elders among you are to exercise oversight, not under compulsion. All right, so the elders among you. Our elders don't have the right to go knocking on other churches' congregations, local churches' doors, saying, hey, no, you can't do that. Don't spend your money there. You're not, you got to get our approval for that first. Hey, we heard you hired someone. You didn't ask us first. You didn't ask us our opinion first on who you should hire as a preacher. Nope. The elders among you, their oversight, their leadership extends only over this congregation and absolutely no further. Church members are to submit to their own leaders in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17. I don't have to submit to anybody else's elders. That's not my responsibility. I'm not within the purview of their work. And so I submit to my own leaders. Therefore, what Church A does only impacts its own members. And what Church B does only impacts its own members. And Church A and Church B have no institutional connection to each other. We all individually share a connection to Jesus Christ. But we share a connection and cooperation as Christians with the other Christians in our local congregation. And even within a congregation, each individual member is going to stand or fall because of his own relationship with Jesus. There is no such thing as group salvation. And again, I don't know if that's a surprise to anybody, and I'm being a little bit facetious there. I hope that you can tell. But there is no group salvation. There's no group salvation. Jesus is not going to take a look at the East Shelby Church of Christ and go, well, because 75% of your members were really great, that was our threshold, by the way, the cutoff. Never told you that, but it was kind of a surprise. 75% faithful membership is the cutoff for letting the whole church in. So the 25% that were slacking, you're just really, really lucky. You're just really, really lucky that the Goodwins and the Douthids take up so much pew space. But no, there's no group salvation. I'm saved because I am in Jesus Christ. I'm saved because I have been added to the body in Jesus Christ. I'm saved because I responded to the gospel and grace has come into my life. And my children will not be saved because I'm saved. Rebecca will not be saved because I'm saved. And none of you will be saved because I am saved. And I think the examples of the 7 churches of Asia, I think really highlight that even though Jesus was able in his wisdom and his insight to give an overall report of each of these congregations, nevertheless, within each of those congregations, there might have been people who were saved and not saved. Right? So he might look at a congregation and say, well, as a whole, this is how things are going in your congregation. They're going really well, they're going really poorly, it's a mixed bag. But even within those congregations, he's saying, yes, but among you, you still have your Jezebels among you. And she's going to pay the penalty. You still have some of those Nicolaitans. And those Nicolaitans are going to be held responsible. But as for you, for those who have not soiled their garments, my encouragement is to continue being faithful. And don't end up with your soiled garments. All right, so even within a congregation where an overall assessment might be true, still it's the individual who has a responsibility and an individual who is either saved or lost. Now, as individuals, we also have a mission. Our mission, which is the church's mission, is to preach the gospel. And so I want to maybe take a slightly different approach to this. Like a lot of times when we talk about individuals in the church, it can be kind of one of those topics where, like maybe if someone's real skeptical about it, they almost want to roll their eyes like, uh-oh, Ryan's doing a lesson, individual stuff and church stuff, and I get it, right? There's individual responsibilities and there's church responsibilities. Ryan, let's just be honest. This is just a roundabout way of saying that the church can't host a potluck in its building, right? This is just a roundabout way of getting to where you're not allowed to have a baby shower in the church building. Okay, so I want to maybe take like just a slightly different angle to this that maybe has a little bit more impact. Because when we focus on what can the church do versus what can the individual do, and it just boils down to, well, what am I authorized to do? What am I allowed to do? What do I have to do? Then it just becomes bullet points on a PowerPoint slide. And they don't feel very real. So I want to focus more on the idea of the mission. Because if we focus on the mission, what is the mission of the church? And if we focus on what is my mission as a father, my mission as a husband, my mission as a citizen of the United States of America, then you do realize that in my mission in all those things, yes, there are parts that will overlap. My mission as a Christian is going to overlap with my mission as a husband and a father and a citizen. But not everything about being a citizen overlaps with my mission in the church. Not everything that I do as a father is going to overlap with what I do in the church. And not everything you do as a father overlaps with everything I do as a father. And so there are overlaps in these things. But if we focus on the mission, I think it just feels less like, and maybe that's just me just trying to find like always looking for the positive spin. Like I really want to know the positive, like useful, practical application in something. But maybe if we focus on that, it becomes a much more useful sort of topic. So local churches are tasked with a mission. It goes all the way back to the Great Commission. You know, we read in Mark 16 as well as in Matthew chapter 28 that the mission of the church is to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Now that mission is accomplished in very large part by what the local church does. Because I can't literally physically go into every single part of the world. Like there is no way if as an individual, listen, as an individual, if my individual mission is to go into all the world and preach to all creation, I literally can't fulfill that mission. I can't. I, Ryan Goodwin, as an individual, cannot go into every single part of this world and preach to all the creation. I physically cannot do that. And so the way that we understand the Great Commission is that as long as I am preaching to my part of the world, and they are preaching to their part of the world, and they are preaching to their part of the world, that the church will fulfill its mission when the local church fulfills its mission. And when every church, every local congregation is preaching to its part of the world, and it is doing what it can to spread, it's doing what it can to reach out, it's doing what it can to grow the kingdom right here in our community, then that will spread to the next community, and to the next community, and to the next community. And when local churches are preaching the gospel to their communities, then the church, singular, the church, fulfills its mission. And so there is kind of this, like, as an individual, I need to be preaching to those who I can preach to. As a local church, we need to be impacting the community that is around us so that the one church of Jesus Christ is fulfilling its mission to preach to the world. That is our mission. Now, as an individual, I'm given a lot of other mandates. There's a lot of other things that I do as an individual that are not necessarily preaching the gospel. Now, I'm going to raise my kids, and I will try to teach them the gospel, and I'll raise them in the fear and the knowledge of the Lord. And as a husband, I'm going to do my best to model Jesus in my relationship, like Ephesians 5 says, and hopefully that bears fruit in Rebecca's own spiritual growth. But there are other things about raising my kids that really don't have a lot to do with my mission as a Christian. You know, I got to get the bills paid, I'm mowing the grass, I'm taking the kids to soccer practice, and I get that somebody might be able to say, well, all of that is a part of showing your kids that you love them. And that's true. That is true. But I don't think that Ryan taking his kids to soccer practice is fulfilling the Great Commission. Like, that's not fulfilling the work of the church. The work of the church is not Ryan taking his kids to soccer practice. That is Ryan's mission as a father to be the best father that I can be. You know why? So that when I teach them the gospel, it has more impact. And so the church collectively should not be burdened with things that are not pertinent to their mission. And it goes back to the idea of, like, the army, right? You have a squad that's going out there. They've got a particular mission. There's danger around every corner. They've got to stay laser focused on the mission that is ahead of them. Nobody's sitting there, like, at night, right? Everyone's kind of bedding down for the night. That someone's on watch right now. We're waiting for 0400 to get up and get moving again. Nobody's pulling out like, no, it's like, well, guys, listen, I saw my daughter doing this the other day. It was crazy. So I went and bought one of those, like, those bracelet bead sets. Anybody up for making bracelets around the campfire? No? Sarge? No? When you're on the mission, it's all about the mission. And making bead bracelets around the campfire is neither pertinent to the mission nor useful to the mission, and can, in fact, be detrimental to the mission. And while making bead bracelets around the campfire is not an evil thing to do, and in another context may actually be a really good thing to do, it has nothing to do with the mission when you're on mission. And so I think that's really what it boils down to for me is, it's not so much just creating a set of bullet points like, well, here's what the individual can do, and here's what the church can do, and there's absolutely no crossing of the boundary. And you go, well, why? See, that's the problem. In a lot of authority lessons and a lot of authority classes, we forget to talk about the why. We say the what and the how, and those are very important to us, the what and the how. You got to do the what, and the how is the how. And we forget to ask well, why? Why? Because I want to stay on mission. That's why. I want to stay on mission. And again, as an individual, I have a mandate to take care of my family members, my own family members. In fact, 1 Timothy 5 even goes out of its way to say the church should not be burdened with that. If you can take care of a family member, do not burden the church with that. There is a delineation that's being made between that you as a family member need to take care of your own family members. And if somebody doesn't take care of their own family members,